Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real delight to be here, and thanks to RIBA and colleagues for hosting us, and thanks Nicholas and the Minister for setting us off. I honestly didn't mean to crash the end of your presentation, Nicholas. and it wasn't me if any slides got taken out. I wanted to sort of do something, I suppose, as Chief Planner, which is sort of marking, I think, the moment in the development of policy in relation to design, quality and beauty. And many people in this room have been part of that journey with me and others over, in my case, 3 decades, and I know for some of you even longer, and for some of you a shorter period of time. And it's this, that we sometimes look to government to lead, we sometimes look to our professions to lead, we sometimes look to our own sort of souls and motivations to lead, how we leave the places we find them, how we change what we do in the built and the natural environment to the benefit of the user, the community, whoever that might be. And I was just going to give a little bit of a reflection, but just to sort of bring us up to date and say we are at quite an interesting moment of opportunity, to my mind. And I came from an event this morning, which I'll tell you about, which is a fascinating way of looking at design and beauty in its fullest extent, and the journey that many different parts of the wider industry that we're all part of is looking at some of these issues. So, a journey of planning for good design and beauty. We will come back to the B at the end. That's my little reminder as to what I was doing this morning. I mean, to Nicholas's point, you know, Firmness, Quality and Delight has been with us for some time. It's the journey for all of us as we start thinking about our natural and built environment. And I think it's just fascinating how much that relates to the principles of sustainable development as they came forward at the beginning of my career with Brundtland, but then as they've progressed over the subsequent decades, that it is about building things of function, building things to last, sustainable, you could argue, and things that bring delight or beauty. So the sort of language we use has changed and evolved over time, but the objectives, I think, are very solidly the same. And many of you will recognise this diagram. We have this constant tension, don't we, as to how to meet time, cost and quality through all the conversations that we have. And those dialogues happen for us as professionals at every scale. They happen at the scale of a window and they happen at the scale of a building, but they also happen at the scale of a place when we're trying to navigate viability for development in the planning system, what the market might bear, lots of conversations like that. But these sorts of principles, I think we always need to understand that tension is always there, and our job is to sort of help all the parties navigate through it. But also remember, whether it's planning, architecture, urban design, landscape architecture, engineering, I have too much experience to know that unless you have the conversation at the right time in the life of a project, the journey of a scope or a brief, the development of a policy versus the looking at a planning application, unless you have the conversations at the right time, you lose that window to have a positive impact. And I think that sort of reflection is also about community. As Nicholas was sort of saying, we're doing huge amounts of work in the department with digital innovations and reaching out to communities and saying, what is important to you? How do we reach voices that don't normally have a voice in the planning system? And being able to say that there are opportunities to shape a positive future, and that development per se doesn't have to be a negative, but actually how do we change the dialogue and make it something positive and for positive change to address all the challenges that we have. And as we know, over the years, we've then done very detailed work about applying it to certain buildings and typologies. And the journey for what we all call urban design started a bit of a way back as well. And I'm going to bring this up to date, but in a sense, the argument I'm making is this journey has been building for some time, and the work we did with the National Model Design Code, through many people in the room, and David's here, is like the contemporary version of all this thinking. It's the bringing together of that menu of important matters that we should be designing around and for, from the street, from the front door to the building, to the neighbourhood, to the part of city, to the wider environment. And Building for Life itself has had an important journey from the early noughties onwards, and now it's called Building for a Healthy Life. And I just think it's worth just again, it might be about words, but it's also about function and reality. We're at this really interesting inflection in terms of looking at health and well-being very directly in our built environment, and how we as professionals reflect that in our thinking. And that may play through in terms of resilience to heat, air quality, the actual quality of the living environment. But also, I'm very lucky to have been at one end of an event quite recently. I was the front end and the back end was Chris Whitty. And we have a chief medical officer and a sort of dialogue in government that is very much looking to planning and placemaking and architecture to be about health and well-being. And again, isn't that a fascinating and exciting opportunity? But we all know through the work of Building for a Healthy Life, which is very much used by Homes England and the Building Design Awards, we have these moments to celebrate, but actually we are still not great at the average housing. There's still a sort of range of qualitative achievement that appears in different guises in different aspects of the built environment. Some are brilliant, some are still a little bit left behind. And, you know, we know, don't we, that we're actually quite good at city making, I think as an industry, when it comes to those bigger mixed-use, curated, managed spaces when we're making bits of city. And actually we still have this way to go, and again the idea about strategic thought about placemaking is going to become very apparent. I'll just touch a little bit on what was being discussed this morning, because I think it's really highly relevant, and this is a very old diagram now, it's Thames Gateway. But this morning, two big things were launched. One was the Environment Improvement Plan by national government, which is a series of commitments from the government to think about the whole totality of our natural environment, biodiversity and so on. And then the second event that I was at was the launch of the Green Infrastructure framework from Natural England. I'm going to talk about the latter because I think it's really powerful for what we need to do and how we think about landscape and the environments we tend to function in, which is ones that are around buildings broadly, or streets and spaces. So we've got an Environment Act that has actually got a huge dose of expectation on what we do and how we change places. We are supposed to be increasing the amount of natural landscape and biodiversity. We're supposed to be knitting bits of our country back together again through local nature recovery strategies. These are all things that are coming forward in planning. And also this morning the launch was about mapping for green infrastructure, all types of infrastructure. You can go on and Google and have a look at the mapping tool that's there, about how you evaluate the green credentials, you know, the sort of landscape, both the green environment and the blue environment within a development, and also an adjunct to the National Model Design Code that looks at green infrastructure. So I suppose what I'm saying is very directly, we're at this really exciting point when we have to be even, you know, really fulsome and holistic about our thinking. And there are many great projects that are doing it. Mayfield is a good example in Manchester where, again, the park is first, the park has led the project. And so I think it's fascinating what we've been doing in a way in preparing the National Model Design Code. Some people in the room might see the back of their heads in this photograph. What we've been doing is, over the years, is bringing out the critique and the ability to evaluate design from, frankly, the sort of university crit room into the professional world. And now we're bringing it even further through things like design review, and now we're bringing it further into the evaluation of planning applications through the National Model Design Code, the specification and definition of quality within the use of design codes, the engagement of community in that dialogue, and then its follow through in terms of decision making. So the ability to specify, test, challenge is sort of really at the heart of it. And you know, and I think we all want more of this rather than some of the things we have been blessed or less blessed with in terms of what comes forward, particularly in terms of housing development. So, as Nicola said, what have we been doing about this in government? Obviously, the update to the NPPF in the summer of 21 was a really important moment. You're going to hear from Sarah and David and others about the National Model Design Code and its rollout with a series of pathfinders. And then we've had the follow-up from the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission and the work of the Office of Place that's progressing. From a slightly more macro political perspective, what I wanted to sort of share with you, and the Minister has spoken about it, but just to sort of elucidate a little bit further, this sort of disjuncture between communities or even local politicians seeing development as a positive is really quite an important aspect of how we evolve the planning system and engage communities more. And I know Mike will probably be talking about it later. So change, unfortunately, is not seen as a good thing by many. So how we engage communities in that dialogue and create, the shorthand is pride of place, or pursue beauty, pursue that building that confidence of the community is a really important aspect of our drivers for how we're changing the planning system. You'll know that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, shorthand known as the LURB, for the uninitiated, is going through Parliament at the moment, and that's got some really important aspects to do with this, including an entire new way of measuring the environmental outcomes of development or a plan. But the sort of all of the bringing these things together, as we know, is this multi-layered, multidisciplinary, solution-based approach to infrastructure, housing, a landscape, but bringing democracy right into the middle of it and helping people think at a neighbourhood level as well as a development level. And then, as you know, in the National Design Guide, we very clearly outline what some of those principles are. The reason I want to note this as sort of, again, a sort of point of progress and inflection is because it very much brings resources, movement, lifespan, and all of the wider aspects to do with development and climate change right into the fore of thinking. And that's incredibly powerful and incredibly important. And the point about design coding being a process, a form of engagement, is really incredibly important. And the fact you use it to define the characters of places and then go through to what you need for your individual neighbourhoods is vital to the process. Oops, one too far. Sorry, if we just go back to that last slide. So what I was just about to show you, which might be in David's pack anyway, is basically the menu from the National Model Design Code, and you're going to hear a bit more about it from colleagues. But the point is that menu is proving to be incredibly useful. It's proving to be engaging for people. It's a way of having that conversation. And for those who haven't clocked it, the National Model Design Code, if you're into footnotes in the NPPF, is a material consideration to planning applications in the here and now. And then through the bill, we will be mandating, i.e. requiring local authorities to prepare an area-based design code. So every local authority will directly address those opportunities within their communities and do that in a very engaged way. So my final plea, and it is a genuine plea, is that local authorities simply don't have enough planners and built environment professionals available to them as an industry and as a marketplace. We're doing loads of work on that at the moment, and we hope to make further announcements about it in the future. But this, dealing with the scale of change that's coming at us, whether that's climate adaptation, flood mitigation, building the homes we need, all of these complex issues, means that we need a genuine cross-industry response, and we actually need more people going into local government. So it's a bit of a plea. If you've got people thinking about career moves and they want to do something exciting and really meaningful, there's obviously public practice and others are doing fantastic work on this to encourage a wide professional grouping to go into local government. Please consider it if you're a mentor or you're supporting colleagues in the industry. This is going to take a collective effort. We're a very phenomenal set of built environment professionals, and the challenges are quite diverse, and we need to be able to respond to them. Thanks very much.